We'll call the Riverview City Council session to order at 6:30 p.m., April 29th, 2024. We really don't take roll at a study session, so we'll go right into the agenda. 2.1, review of proposed 2024-25 annual budget for the City of Riverview. Background, the purpose of this budget review session, and consider the following items. Jeff.
Good evening, Your Honor and Council. Tonight we have the formal budget presentation by departments. I know that I did send a schedule of the different departments in the budget. I was able to deliver a completed book on Friday, so you had a completed book for the weekend. The numbers that were given to you on, I believe, April 1st, I think that they are the same numbers. They have not changed. I think there might have been a couple small de minimis changes, but nothing of any material magnitude in the budget. So I think that, I don't want to go through my letter or the org charts, but I think we'll just follow the schedule as noted. Now, I'm not sure where Mike Kettler is tonight yet, so we might push golf to the end, and we'll just move through that in that order.
We can do that. And I did forgot to add, in the past, all the other budget meetings and study sessions that we've had, when Ann goes through the budget, if there's anything that going to require a major discussion or some type of more information, we move that to the end of tomorrow's meeting, so it'll allow them to get the answers, and they'll just, because we got a lot to go through, we want to go through much tonight as we can. So, and we also, if obviously Councilman Prey is not here, if you miss a budget session, obviously we're not going to repeat it, but he can get with the city manager and the department head and get caught up on whatever we discussed tonight. So with that, Jeff or Ann, whoever wants to do that.
All right, and I will turn over to Ann. And Ann and her team, along with all the department heads, have supplied the information, and then she organized it in this budget book. But this was under, my direction, so I guess it is my budget, but it is worked with the department heads. So, Ann, without further ado, if you want to start.
Thank you. Get your microphone on.
Don't, right? Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present my first budget, so I'm pretty excited about that. Also, for anyone in the audience, if they want to follow along with us, the budget that was given to the council can be found on the City of Riverview website under Departments, under Finance Treasurer, and under Budget Documents on the left-hand side, and then go to the 2024-25 working budget. So if you want to follow along with us, you're more than welcome to grab that off the website and follow along. So I'm going to kind of follow the agenda. I wanted, for the first part, I want to kind of go over like the large items, the large picture, not the individual line items, but the total large picture. So what I'm going to do is kind of go over the page numbers, and I'll get you to where we're at, and I'll kind of explain some of the most important finances regarding the city. If we look at the first page, on page 3, we talk about property tax revenue. Property tax revenue is one of our largest sources that we use for the city to operate. We want to go to, if we look at the chart that was given on page 3, what we have is the change in taxable value. We talked about, Eric was in the other day to talk about taxable value. What happens when we start with a budget? How do we prepare a budget? The first thing we look at is how much tax revenue are we bringing into this community? So that's one thing, one of the first things we look at. And I kept telling the guys, where's your capital improvements? Because we know the other majority is wages and fringes, but what builds a budget is your tax revenue and your capital improvements. And that's why I chose to do those first, because those are big items. We need to keep those on the radar. It's not our everyday expenses, but they exist and they don't go away unless we look into the future about those. So when we're looking at taxable value, as of 2024, we're at $377 million. We are going to estimate from Eric that our taxable value for the state of Michigan, not just us, for the entire state of Michigan is estimated to go up at 5%. So I took the 377 and went up to the 396. So that's how I came up with the taxable value. What we keep telling everybody is that taxable value is not at levels where it should be. When I went back into the history, and I don't have this here, but I will do graphs when I do for a public hearing, in 2007, our taxable value was 387 million. 387 in 2007. 18 years later, we are now up back to where we were 18 years ago. So think of your own home money that you get. Where would you be if you had your money that you were making 18 years ago? We could not do what we do. So actually, that's the importance that we're here, that's really what's going on in the state of the economy in the state of Michigan. So we're not alone. We're not alone in this boat, but those are some of the concepts and theories that we're building this budget off of. So if we go to page, the Appendix A, so we're going to jump to property tax with the Appendix A, and that's on page 153. So in the first column, so we see that how the budget was built up, how the taxes are coming to the city. So last year in total, we had $8.3 million. Also included on this, and I know that Jeff has been very adamant, is the additional 2 mil public safety millage is included in this budget. So that brings up total taxes, not just general fund, total taxes, including debt, rubbish, EMT, roads, and library, to $9.5 million. If we go to the next page, 154, again, that's just our taxable value and how it's gone up since 2012. And then page 155, this is a history of the 23 taxes. So the additional 2 mills is not in the Riverview, but it's just a little chart that shows you how we compare to other communities. And I think it's important that we're kind of right in the middle. We're lower than some, higher than others, but we kind of stay in the middle, which is a good thing, right? Even if we add the 2 mills on, we'll still kind of be in that middle range. So that's the scope of property taxes. So the next big issue, which only affects general fund, is state share revenue. This is the money we operate based on the state of Michigan. Oh, can I jump back? I want to jump back because I think it's important to bring up while we're talking about taxes. Go back to Appendix A. I'm sorry, usually, but. So Appendix A, if you look at page 153, I want to bring to the attention that if you look at the operating mills, that we are authorized to do 20 mills. Because of the Headley, we always talk about the Headley, that has been reduced down to 14.65%. So in the event we go back to our taxable value and the 20 mills that were allowed to us, we wouldn't even be here talking because we'd be in a financially great situation. But the state has caused all these communities in the same boat to be in the same place.
So basically, Ann, can you look at as we're being penalized for not taxing at the max?
We are.
Okay.
We are. Over the years, we've gotten penalized, and because of that big drop in taxable value, it's hurt a lot of community. It hurt every community in Michigan. They're all under the same thing, but that's why everyone's fighting over the same money, and you can understand that why that would be.
Thank you.
So, okay, we'll go, sorry, we're going to jump back to state share revenue. So state share revenue is the thing we get from the state. Those are the monies we get from the state of Michigan based on our census. And so we're right now at $1.6 million. And that's, if we're going to go into it, that is a lot of how general fund operates. Not police and fire, but that's how the administration of the general fund operates. That's where it gets its money to operate. We're going to see later that not many taxes actually are there for the general fund, that the police and fire get all of them. And that's normal in most communities as well. So that's that. We're going to talk about staffing. We are right now at 90.5 full-time employees. That's where we are currently. I guess, over the years, we've had, in the past, there's been lots of employees, and everyone had to scale down, doing more with less, and employees have to take on more. So right now, we're at a 90.5, so this budget is based on 90.5 full-time employees. We go to healthcare. Obviously, healthcare is a big issue. We are estimating an increase of about 12%. The city of Riverview actually, from the state of Michigan, decides to do the 20%. There was two things that the state passed. One was a hard cap, that the community could not pay more than the hard cap, or the community would not pay, that the employees were to pay a 20% premium of their premiums. And so the city of Riverview has chose to go that second option. So that does help with healthcare cost, that the 20% is coming back.
Excuse me, Ann, what page are you getting that information off of?
The what?
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm sorry, four.
Thank you.
And then, obviously, another big issue facing communities is the employees' retirement the employee retirement system. So currently, we are, since for June 30th, 2023, our pension fund is actually 86% funded, which is fantastic. Most communities, the state requires 60%. A lot of communities are at 70%, so our pension system's at 86.58%. We have 108 retirees currently, I'm on page 5, currently collecting, and we have 16 active employees. We're going to still be eligible for that. In 2013, all new hires are subject to a defined contribution plan. So legacy cost has stopped as of 2013, but they will continue obviously until the pension system is closed. We also have, now that I've gone through this, I can see, we also have our OPEB, which is our other employee benefits for retirees. That is not required to be funded, so we are only at a 4% funding level. That's very common as well. We started contributing $200,000 additional since 2020, so we'll continue to get there, but the state does not require at this time for us to fund it at all. We have currently 92 people in the OPEB system, and we have 26 left. Again, the city has, for all new employees, now has a retiree health care savings account. So once those people are gone, that legacy cost will be closed. So two good things that are going on. So next we're going to go to the water sewer rates. So that's another big area. Our water and sewer is about a $6 million entity. It's an enterprise fund. How we get revenue for that is to water rates. You have to have water rates to support the fund. It's an enterprise fund, it's self-supporting, it should not be eating off the general fund, and it does not eat off the general fund. It's self-sustaining owned business, and that's the way it's ran. Rates are looked at every year to see if they are covering current cost. In the past, they weren't covering the debt fund, which we're eating into our reserves because we're not collecting enough. In this budget, we're proposing a 9% increase for water and sewer rates, and that's to cover the debt, operations, and capital maintenance and replacement. And you're going to see a big capital and replacement that needs to get done Can't keep putting it on the back burner. We really got to look into that and dive into those future capital expenditures. So that's page 5. Page 6, again, is our infrastructure. In the next portion of this presentation, we are going to go into the infrastructure. We are going into our capital, 5-year capital improvement plan and a capital equipment program. All very necessary, and just to give you guys a feeling of what's out there and what needs to be done, and can't keep putting it on the back burner. So that's the capital projects. Again, we're going to look at property taxes. We're going to look at the proposed levies. As I said, and we already looked through the pages, we could, by not being able to assess our 20 mills, we would have been allowed $7.9 million, and we're only allowed to collect $6.4 million. So we'd have a $1.5 million more revenue coming in if we were allowed to assess the 20 mills. So it has to come up some way. So that's where we keep getting back to that number. All right. Now let's jump to, now we're going to talk about capital improvements. That's a big issue. That's what, along with the revenues, the capital improvements are what drive the expenses. Other than employee and benefits, this is the next drive. So if we go to page 159, so if we go to page 159, these are our capital improvements. These are infrastructure. These are the big ticket items that we need to look at, and we broke it down. This is maintenance, this is repairs, this is big ticket items. So if we look at page 159, we have a couple things at the fire station that need to get taken care of. Not really, capital per se, more of a maintenance type issue. These are in 24-25, this is what's in this current budget, along with the other departments. In the municipal building, we wanted some security cameras, or some security things for about $30,000. And we also, which the council approved, we are putting in the HVAC back for $318,000. So we had sent that to council. It is approved. It's actually going to be in. So we're probably ahead of the ball game on that one. And we'll go to the capital improvement fund, and we'll see where that money is coming from. So that's page 159. A lot of intensive capital is within the Department of Public Works. On page 160, you can see that there's a lot of sewer lining that needs to be done. We're budgeting about $800,000 this year in the sewer line of the sewers. And the water distribution, they were talking about the lead elimination. That's of the lead replacement lines, that's about $85,000. And then we need some water main replacement, which is budgeted at $500,000. And then we want a meter replacement as well. That's $160,000. And then we got the water leads visual of $93,000. So that you can see these are very capital intensive. That's going to drive those water rates as we talked about. So if we keep going, we're going to go to page 162. These are the major and local street funds. You can see that there's local street sectioning really needs to get caught up. We have about $1 million in major and local streets that need to get taken care of. So we are budgeting that for the next 5 years. And we got some joint sealing, so the continuity of the roads, just like everywhere else, they're in disrepair and they need to get taken care of. 160, like I said, these are all budgeted, and we'll go through those budgets. In the Parks and Rec, we're budgeting a playscape, so that was $75,000, and then some ball maintenance. Obviously, another huge area is the land preserve. Very, very capital intensive. Not just cells, but just maintenance. Everything there is expensive, just like I always say in the DPW. Anything you do there is expensive. It doesn't come cheap. So here are the capital projects that need to be done within the land preserve. Some of the big ones are the lake trees system. We know that that's being talked about. And there's some different concrete repairs. Big one is the gas extension. So those are some big areas there that we have budgeted. And we can talk about those within the internal budget when we go to look at that. So for capital maintenance, we have about $4.8 million on page 165 that we incorporated as capital improvements in the next budget year. And it, as you can see, it continues on. It doesn't go away. Infrastructure is old, and it needs to get replaced. And again, this community is no different than any other community, but because all the lines and cities have been around for 50, 60 years, they're all getting old. Okay, next one is the capital equipment program. These are more like vehicles, and you're more like a vehicle type situation. So if we look at page 167, we have about $1.6 million budgeted for vehicles, and we'll go through the line items. Like I said, these are just mowers. Some are little, some are big, right? If you can go through the pages, looking for a riding mower in the Public Works on page 168, $17,000. Next big purchase is on page 170. Police Department needs a new vehicle. I remember vehicles were $23,000. Well, they're $75,000 now for a vehicle. So that's on page 170. 171, the council had already approved an ambulance of $395,000. So that is approved, that's on order. I don't know when we estimate to get that, it should be soon, but just wanted to put it out there, and there is possible deposit on a second one, and that will be done in 26, 27. So that's what makes these capital improvement programs, it just kind of what's on the radar, what needs to get done. So that's on 127, or 126, 27. 173, Water Department needs a new truck, $85,000. And then on the land preserve, they're looking at a new dozer in the amount of $900,000. $176, what do you got, a tractor for $26,000, and then a mower at the golf course in the amount of $80,000. So that is, there's a couple of them. So that is the capital improvement schedule. Well, how do we pay for all this capital improvement, right? There's one option, cash. And then if you go to page 157, here's your debt schedule that already exists. So this is your current debt outstanding for the current year. So you're looking at over $3 million in principal and interest that exist out there. We are looking at obviously the water main road repair. Obviously that is going to expire in 25, 26. And at that time, I would assume we're talking about going out for an additional or a replacement millage for that type of, to pay for all those capital improvements that we just talked about. So that is that. So now we can get into the funds. That's just like the overall general picture.
And 1 second. And as we go through the capital improvements plan, those are placeholders for those assets. Sure, we'd love to do them all, but we've got to see exactly what we can afford to do and prioritize. It's not a given that that this budget's approved and then the checkbook opens and all of those things are purchased. That's not the case. We're going to see how that goes. There's things like the dump truck and the mowers at the golf course and things like that. You know, they're on the radar that we might need them, but to say we're going to get them for sure, that's not true either. So we will monitor our assets and take care of the ones that are in need of emergency repair and such. So I just want to make sure you understand that, just because these are a budget and a placeholder. Anything would have to come before you for a vote anyhow, so, and that's how that works, so. And that's just, you know, for the new councilman, Mr. Webb, just so you understand that. I know your colleagues understand that, but I want to make sure you understood that.
And then Jeff, we do have someone that can repair most of the equipment in-house, so we do save money by keeping things up to date and fixing them as
We
needed,
do.
correct?
We have a mechanic in the DPW for that equipment, for police cars and that equipment, and we also have someone at the golf course that maintains the golf equipment. We have a lot of golf equipment that's over 20 years that's really supposed to last 7 to 10 years, but with good maintenance, you know, we can keep them, you know, lasting longer, so. I just want to make sure everyone knows that even though that these are placeholders, that doesn't mean it's all going to get spent next year. That's all.
Thank you.
All right, I guess if we want, we can head, do you want to, we can work down the list? Okay, so next we'll go to the land preserve, so page 137. So going to the land preserve, obviously in every budget, you're gonna see where it kind of talks about what the fund is all about and the goals and objectives of the department manager. So I'm not gonna go, we're just gonna look at the budget line items per se and the overall, if that's okay, so we can continue to move on. So let's go to page 138, and we can kind of skip to 139 as well. So 138 on the left-hand side, we're looking at revenues, what the expected revenues are supposed to be. So in 2024-25 budget, we are budgeting $13.2 million in revenue. Thinking that that's more realistic with the economic times. If you follow the history, last year's projected, it's more in line. So we wanted to be more conservative and budget more in line as far as the revenues, with the changing times in the land preserve revenues, in the volatile market that it's experiencing. Only, like I said, then what makes up that entity is based on user fees. That's the only thing that goes there. There's no taxes that go there. It's all self-contained. It's its own little business and big business, I should say. 13 million is not small, but it is self-contained. If we go to page 140, I'm just kind of looking at the highlights, any differences. We look at the debt, our debt for the land preserve. Most of the debt is capital financing for the big trucks. So that's what most of that financing was. We did add one on the bottom. That was the $900,000 dozer that they think we needed. So we budgeted for that. We are probably going to finance that. We will look closely to see where our revenues and expenses are. But as of now in this budget, it will be fine. It should be financed or will be financed. So the other additional about a little over $500,000 was that payment that you guys approved back to the water fund. So that's what makes up that big difference, the 44 and 94 for principal and interest. So that was derived from that interfund loan that was done. If you look at all over, you can see from lines 725 of the budget, so 596, 526, 725, all the way down to 596, 526, 736. That is all your operation, that is all your salaries and benefits. So we will see later, I'll do some charts that salary and wages take, all right, I just ran the numbers. So if the whole budget being presented for everything is $40 million, the wages and fringes were about half of it, total across the board. So we can get more into detail of those, and I will have charts and stuff when we go to do the public hearing, but this was just looking at the budgets individually. So that takes care of your salary and fringes. There's really nothing that is jumping out. As you can see, that there's some big expenses, you know, you got diesel, like I said, everything's expensive. Everything you do is expensive. So you got diesel, you got the maintenance on the equipment, big numbers, so just the heavy equipment. The gas and oil is $550,000. The heavy equipment is, just to repair that, is almost $500,000. So again, those are big numbers. There's not, everything is just about budget to where it should be. If you go to page 142.
And one second, excuse me, there's also leachate removal. We've been talking about leachate.
Yeah.
It used to be that our actual activity in 2022, 2023 was 237. It's budgeted at 500,000 right now. So that's a, 100% increase and over that year, and it's not going to go down. So we're going to have to deal with that.
So 141, there really is no difference. I'm going to bring your attention to 142. And I want to bring your attention to some of the big numbers on the actual for 2022-23. When we present a budget, it is more on a cash basis than accrual basis. But when you go to do the audit, they have to do it on a full accrued basis, which makes the numbers, because we're going to get fund balance, you're going to go, why is fund balance the way it exists? Because you're not going to see that fund balance in general fund, because the land preserve owns about $44 million in assets, net assets, and has $79 million in liabilities. So you're going to see the fund balance, because fund balance is assets, less liabilities is fund balance. But it's different in an enterprise fund. It's like a business. It's not just cash in, cash out, and you get a fund balance like you do in general fund, because you have all these full accruals like business entities that need to be done. So if you take this year in 2022-23, we added $7 million to our $64 million post-closure liability. So that's why these numbers are, because you're doing it on a full accrual basis. And you're also recording, if you look down, you're almost doing $4.5 million just in depreciation, which is a book and not a cash entry, but a book entry. And so you get these numbers and you get fund balance that looks odd, so it's hard to look at a fund balance and go, oh, but it's different than the general fund. The general fund is very straightforward, and that's just how GASB records things, the way the different funds are recorded. So if you look at page 143, our total expenditures for projected from this year to last year, it actually went down. So in the year before, our projected for 23-24 at the end of this fiscal year was $12.8 million. This year was budgeted $12.2 million. And if you look at fund balance, that's why I'm telling you the fund balance looks like so odd. It's because of the assets less the liabilities of the $64 million book liability that exists. Not only book, but real, but it's a liability on the book. So that's why that fund balance looks so, but those are true fund balances that are reported to on the financial report. Yeah, I mean, you can see that it's just, there's not a whole lot different from, and a lot, like I said, again, it's very capital intensive. And if something doesn't get done, it goes back into cash. So that's one thing we need to remember too. And some of these funds, if it stays in its own fund, if we don't do it, if we budget it and we don't do it, it stays in cash. So it just helps the cash flow value. Is there anything else you want to add to the land reserve?
Yeah, just one other
Kevin wants to?
number. In accordance with the deficit elimination plan, 596, on page 143, you'll see that 1.5 was budgeted last year. This year, 500,000 is budgeted, so that is consistent with the plan.
Yep. Sorry about that. Do you want to add anything, Kevin, or are you good?
I'm all set unless there's any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Nope.
All righty, next we're going to do the golf.
Mike is here.
Mike
Right.
is here. Okay.
I apologize, I thought it was a 7 o'clock start. It's okay.
Okay. All right, we're going to turn to page 117. So again, we have the overview and the goals and objectives of the department manager. If we go to 118, I think you've seen this graph before. What we are trying to do is show that the revenues are increasing. You had just passed a rate increase as of February, so the rate increases are now, and we incorporated those rate increases into this golf budget. So you can, on the graph, it shows that the 23, 24, and then we added additional on the 24, 25 for revenue. So we raised rates that would cause, if on page 119, we're raising the rates would be about $250,000 that will generate through the golf course. And also, I want to, so that was a big part of why the revenues increased so much.
And I think that started effective today, didn't it, Mike? The new rates?
That's correct, summer rate started today.
There you go. So those will go into play. Also, I just wanted to let you know that needed to be done because we received a letter from the state for June of '23 that a deficit elimination plan needed to be done. We were in a deficit about $58,000 between cash, between current assets less current liabilities. So I will give that to you at the next meeting to vote for, so we can eliminate that, but do it to this budget and do the rate increases, it should be no problem. It's just going to be, we're letting the state know that we've made changes and to eliminate that deficit. We already look better in 2023-24. So I don't see a problem with it. We're just going to put something together because of the rates, and it should alleviate that deficit and take care of that issue.
And just a note, I addressed it in my letter to you, but by us recording the debt from the interfunds, we had to pick up that current liability for the next year payments. So by doing that, that increased our liability, so. But it's on the books now, it's shown, so they're paying interest back to water, so we're doing it the right way. Instead of just leaving it in a due to, due from.
Thanks.
So I wanted to, and then on page 120, wanted to address the increase in the debt, again, is due to that loan. So $100,000 is due to the interfund loan that we needed to record. If we look at expenses, Nothing really jumped out. So if you look at the page 122, I mean, there was really nothing that looked out of line. If we go to page 122, we have that fairway mower budgeted of $80,000. The difference between our revenue, what was budgeted last year and what was budgeted this year is about $322,000. And the difference of that 322, increase in the expenditures was 100 for the debt, for the loan, $80,000 for the mower, and what else did we have? And the salaries and benefits went up 112, so that makes up the 294. So those were the two big, the debt and the mower made up the difference.
So on that mower, our two fairway mowers are, what, 20 years old, Mike? Historically, you get 7 to 10 years, but they have been maintained, and our mechanic is maintaining them. We're hopeful that we'll get this season out of them, and I've instructed Mike and Scott, the superintendent, to look for a used piece of equipment. We found that we've purchased a couple used pieces lately that are A, in good shape, and B, can be maintained by our mechanic. So, again, we wouldn't spend that money unless there was some kind of an emergency and we couldn't find a used one, but they're already looking for a used one, so it's not that we need the greatest and latest, and we just need to be able to mow the fairways, just like you need to mow your home, you know? I mean, I think what Riverview realized 3 years ago, or I guess it's 4 years ago now, that to be in the golf business, that we have to have a product we can sell. And we now have a product we can sell. And I think that's a real, I applaud council, mayor and council and the golf committee to understand that, because our revenue was going down the hill quick. And with the golf improvements, our revenue has grown, and I got a strong suspicion that the rates went up today, and I don't think that we had any less play today, Mike, did we?
Outside of the chance of rain, no. People are still walking in.
So I think you're gonna see the increases in more than, make up the difference in the note payable. So I think we're gonna chart it. Ann's gonna chart it quarterly, so we'll see where we're at. But we're coming to our heavy months right now, April, May, and June for the close of the year. So.
And then, as we talked about in the land preserve, you also got those liabilities with assets and liabilities in the golf course as well, because it's a self-sustaining entity and is treated that way. On page 121, you need to record an actual, you need to record $336,000 just depreciation. So, like I said, these funds get a little confusing because they're so different than the just regular governmental funds. Okay, anything, Mike, you want to add? Nope? Okay. We can move on.
Well, wait a minute. Any questions for Mike?
Oh, yeah.
Any questions from council for Mike or Ian?
I just had a question about.
Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. The beverage card sponsorship. So is that something we get every year and it's certain, you can put it in the budget ahead of time?
Yes, they have signed 3-year agreements, I think, and they're on the last year of their 3-year with the bev carts. And they actually paid for our bev carts by that sponsorship. And what's beautiful, if they're well-maintained, we can get 6 years out of them. So we've got a cart fleet that we're going to be looking at bidding out, but we won't bid the beverage carts. So you are correct. We get that for 3 solid years. They sign an agreement with us. And we've had interest of other people wanting that sponsorship on the bev carts. So if our current sponsors don't want to do it, next year in the next 3 years, I'm sure, Mike creates an invoice for them on the agreement in January, and I think one is paid and the other one's paying this week. So that's how we pay for the bev carts. Yep.
Thank you.
Again.
Good?
Yep.
That's like, all right, we can go on to the water and sewer fund.
Page number,
Page 127. Oh, he said we didn't do the golf practice fund.
Oh.
So we need to go to the golf practice fund, 127, we don't want to leave it out. And I think it's almost identical. I think that's why I didn't do it.
The only thing
Jump
I want to say about the golf practice fund, which I think Mike and his team does a great job, is, we're budgeting $160,000 in range balls. That's people renting them at $5 and $10 a bucket. So can you imagine how many buckets of balls that we rent out to get to that? I'm accustomed to $55,000 or $60,000 a year, so I was shocked. I thought it was a misprint. I thought it wasn't a right amount, but, so we do have a good range. Mike will tell you that it wasn't built in the right direction, facing the sun at night and hitting uphill, but people still seem to use it, and a lot of the high schools use it, of course, and all the leagues use it, so I think that's a darn good number. So, anyhow.
All right, 127. Again, it explains the water side and the sewer side. So 127 is just a summary of the debt service. There's a lot of debt service, it's land intensive with the DUA and all the, that goes into that and all the different payments is the Downriver Utility Authority. We've all got into it and we're all sharing bond cost for the improvements to that system. 128 is how the 9% was developed. Looked at consumption, what the current rates were, took the total budget that was being requested for everything, including operations debt and capital improvements, took what the total budget was being projected, took the current consumption. Consumption is pretty, I think over the past years, it declined a lot, and people are getting more conscious to what water they're using. But over the last 3 years, it kind of remained stable. So I took the last 3 average of what consumption was and used that number for the consumption. And did what the current rates were and how to facilitate what we would need to make this break even as far as rates to cover everything that is being done. GLWA had passed along a 3.5% in water increases, so that needs to take into account. We need to budget for those line items. In the event we don't raise rates, it's just going to get behind because it's important. It's one of the first things I learned in governmental accounting is don't let those rates slide because you will get so behind the 8 ball you're never going to be able to catch up on the infrastructure. Because when you think about it, that infrastructure covers, how did I say? Let's see, 38 miles. We don't think it's there, but there's 38 miles of water and sewer mains under the city that this water and sewer fund have to take care of. And what people don't see, they don't know, right? So they're just gonna, but it's happening. So that's why the projected proposed rate in this budget is 9%, but we will definitely bring it to council, and that's the council's choice.
And I'd just like to say that it was past years that we did not cover the cost, and the water fund was subsidizing the water rate. And that's a difficult thing, because you can get, as Ann said, you get behind and you can't catch up. I know there was a previous city manager that was raising rates 20%, 19%, and 21%. And I don't know how he got away with that, but he did, and I know he fought a lot of people with that, but that was the right thing to do back then, because we lost a couple of huge industrial companies that was using consumption that could amortize the cost. And so that's what people don't realize, that we don't have those big industrial users that we can amortize the cost over. So I just, I know that the past council have heard this before, but I wanted Mr. Webb to hear that, just so that he kind of understands that. That's a big component of the equation, or the formula, is industrial users.
It is a big part of it, and actually, for years, the criticism we received is that the city, you could cut here, cut there. Well, for years, the city absorbed the cost of those water rates. And now and you can only do that for a measurable amount of time before it starts to catch up with you. And so that's kind of the position we're in, where the city absorbed those rates for years, and now it's time to stop doing that.
Okay. So on page 131, this is the water side, so you can see those rates are built into the budget. There's not a lot else going on in the water except for the rates. Also, interest from the land, we're showing that as interest income. The 135,110 is being shown as interest income from the other two enterprise funds for the advance. Again, on page 132, these are all the debt payments, so a little over $500,000 in debt payments through Wayne County and through the utility authority for all the debt that's outstanding. Like I said, we do a portion of it. We pay about 3% of the total debt out there, and that's based on our usage. Sewer, if we look at sewer operations, it pretty much stayed the same. Again, we have to look at the sewer consumption went up on page 133. And then we go to, again, there's that sewer lining that needs to be done. And that $800,000, if you go down to 712 and 88,000. So that's the sewer lining. On the water side, again, on page 134 on the bottom, the water consumption, they're actually projecting it to go down a little bit from 115 to 981. If you go to 135, the actual budget for the Department of Public Services went from 3.7 million to 2.9 million. And again, we're showing you the difference is because if you look at those bottom, the water main replacements, they were budgeted in 23-24, but if you look at the 23-24 activity, they haven't spent anything yet. So again, that's showing you that even though it's in the budget, we expected to do it, we didn't do it, it goes back in the fund balance. We don't put it somewhere else, it stays there, whether the project couldn't get done, the contractors weren't, whatever happened, it stays in their fund and we will budget, then we budget the 600, so it stays there, and that's what I'm trying to let you know. Even though it's budgeted, we didn't spend it, it's just gonna stay in their cash balance.
Before we go on, hey, Jeff, would you speak about the meter replacement and how you think that could, A, save us some water loss, and B, increase revenue in the water department?
Sure. So, thank you for the question, Little Mayor, Council. The water meters are currently at the end of their life cycle.
How old is that?
The average lifespan is supposed to be 20 years, so we're reaching that at this point right now. So we would like to replace all commercial meters, starting with that. With the new meters, you will also get a much more accurate meter, much more updated meter. And along with that, we're looking to update the meter reading system, which will be comprised of two components, one at the DPW and one at the landfill on the tower, so that the meters send out a signal and we're able to pick those up right from a desk and let people know when they call what their usage was last 5 minutes, last 2 minutes, last week, last month. So that's our goal for this budget, and then continuing on in the future, we'd like to start replacing all residential meters. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Councilman Workman.
Jeff, one quick question. When water meters fail, can you explain what happens when water meters fail?
So as the water meters reach the end of their life cycle, one, they actually have a battery in there for the pack that sends out the radio signal. So those are starting to fail at this moment, so we're spending a lot of money replacing those. But as the meters get older, they actually either, one, stop working, or they start registering less than what the actual customer is using.
Then, Jeff, that would be the rest of the residents to pay the cost in their water bill for these people that aren't paying their full price. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
That's a great point from both you gentlemen, because one of the major complaints we do receive is when somebody receives their meter fails for whatever reason and it gets replaced, their next water bill is higher. And so they're saying there's something wrong with the new one, but I think I've learned in the past that these meters, when they're designed, when they fail, they're designed to fail in favor of the customer.
Correct. Businesses that produce meters would not be in business very long if their meters are found to have been inaccurate or overcharging customers.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One other question, Jeff, since we're talking. You're lining the sewers. Isn't it true that we pay for the water that gets into our pipes, and we pay for that price in sewage, and that, in other words, if the pipe is letting water in, which is the reason we're lining it so that doesn't occur, then the residents have to pay more in their sewage bill if we don't line. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Mayor, question about the meters.
Councilman Webb.
When a new meter is installed, is there additional charge or fee to the residents?
No, there's not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ann.
Okay. We'll have Jeff on the line for a little bit, not Jeff Webb. We're going to do the major and local streets. We'll get those done because they're under his direction. We are going to go to major streets, page 89. So the major and local street funds, they kind of run together. The major streets, there's about 6.2 miles of major streets. The major streets money is given to us by the state of Michigan through the Act 51. For the major streets, we get, if you look on page 90, about $967,000 a year for the major streets. And then on page 91, we are going to do, again, big capital things. We're going to do some, we have budgeted to do some street sectioning. So up on page 91 in the revenues and the expenses, we're going to do about $300,000 of street sectioning. And then, so that's the major expense here. And then we want to go down to what happens in the major street is we budget for a net zero, and we actually transfer whatever the excess revenue is to the local streets. We still have in fund balance about $1.5 million in the major street funds. So I think in the past couple of years, things have not been getting updated as far as street repairs. So there is money available to prioritize and get some of the major streets done. So that will be, it was part of the budget, like I said, it was part of the capital improvement plan. So just putting it on your guys' radar, there is some money and some things probably need to get repaired.
Your Honor.
Councilman Workman.
Sohio, through your chair to Sohio.
Go ahead.
Sohio, I know that we can transfer from major streets to local streets. Because we have a new council person, you might want to explain why we can do that and what we have to look to at the future with our major streets, and I'd like to know the condition of our major streets and when you suspect we won't be able to transfer the funds any longer.
That's correct. What we have is an asset management plan based on the PASER that we performed a couple of years ago. If we have an asset management plan in place, we are allowed to transfer up to 100% from major to local. That's if we can prove that most of the major roads are taken care of. So again, the transfer is properly handled, but again, we got to keep paying attention to the major roads that some of them need definitely some attention. So we can, although we can transfer 100% at this point, I don't recommend it.
Thank you, Ohio. Go ahead, Ann.
Okay. So we're not, just so, we're not transferring 100%, we still have 1.5 million.
All right.
Just to wait. So the local street fund, there's about 28 miles for local street fund. We also have a millage for that, so that's just not the local street fund, and we always have a millage of the in-property taxes for that as well. So if you look on page 93, I think it's 1.74, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's a major. 70. What is? 0.70 is for major, for the local streets. So that's 277. Again, we get about 420 from Act 51, and then we have that transfer in. So if you look at our expenditures that we have expended for that one, they are doing some, plan to do some, again, street sectioning in the amount of $700,000 that is budgeted for this period, this budget. And again, we want to look at the fund balance that's available there as well, same situation. If need be, we can come back and re-budget or allocate the budget because there's $1.5 million in that fund as well. So there is money available to do some street work. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. Let's see, what else do we have for him? Yeah, let's just go down and finish him off. We'll do we can do the garbage. We'll do the garbage next. So garbage and rubbish. This was a fund that was created through a millage just a few years ago for a 1.74 mil. And what it does is it brings in about $690,000 and it pays for the trash to be taken. So it pays for the trash contractor to pick up trash. I'm trying to say it this point. Yes, on page 96. So that was just purposely that millage for the trash collection. Any questions on that or anything that
Any
be
questions?
simple?
Councilman Webb?
For the millage for rubbish, it could be up to 3 mils, is that correct?
That is correct.
We can do up to 3.
That's what I said, we can do up to 3 mils. And we're currently at 1.74, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Councilman Ganaga?
I just had a question. Have we gotten anywhere with subscription curbside recycling? I've had a few people ask if we were going to move forward with being able to sign up, just a household here, a household there, whoever actually wants it, and pay monthly or biweekly or whatever they will do.
Your Honor and Counsel, I was not instructed to push forward with that, but if that's something we want to look at in the future, we can. I thought that it's close to $200,000 if it was on the city's dime. I don't know what it was. I never saw a breakdown if it was subscription-based, but we can look back out and see what they can offer. You know, we don't have to formally bid it, we'll get a quote just to see what they're talking about. The other thing is, I know that to do a subscription base, they really want some participation. They don't want one house on a street you know, you have to have a certain number. I think it's something like 4,400 stops, or, Jeff, how many stops is it right now for our trash? Yeah, I thought it was over
I
4,000.
think it's 4,000.
So they'd probably want at least a couple thousand stops, would be my guess, to make it worthwhile to have recycling trucks in the city. So we need to figure that out. I'll get with Jeff and we'll talk to Stevens, and they were the one that won the last bid. You know, they were the cheapest, Stevens, for the recycling program, if it was going to be a 100% city. So we'll have to check with them again, and I'll get Jeff Kay and Jeff Webb on it, and we'll figure out what the requirements would be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Councilman Webb.
Just another additional thought on that 1.74 mils, seeing the last bullet point saying that future years disposal will go from partially covering the service to fully covering the service once it will need to be trucked elsewhere, which is a very valid point, and learning from the water rates not being increased gradually to those major jumps. An unpopular thought, but should we maybe start considering increasing towards that 3 mils instead of 1.74 for those future costs?
Yeah, that goes up. Yeah.
Well, you're correct, because we have been told by other communities that it's going to be $1.75 a mile for some of these other communities that have to go past Riverview Land Preserve. So it definitely, you know, they're going to have to take it away past Riverview now. So I agree. I have no idea what that is, but we can start looking at that for sure.
And I'll just remind everyone, the reason we looked at did the 1.74 for the trash and put an end to the consideration of recycling, because it's just something we couldn't afford without the expansion. It's just, it all comes back to that.
You're correct, Your Honor.
Thank you.
If we can jump down, we'll just do all the public works stuff that's under his, so if we jump down to page 63, we're gonna go down to general fund. These are part of the general fund, even though we're gonna really talk about general fund tomorrow in more detail. So page 63. So this is the public works activity that takes care of the facilities. And like I said, this is contained within the general fund. The biggest differences are, if we look on page 64, the big difference is the pension, city pension contribution, and that is because the pension is allocated. It's, when we look at the pension system, we budgeted $100,000 this year, and last year, it's just the allocation of the active members. So we're charging the allocation based on the 16 active members in that proportion. So even though we're not doing the more, it's just getting allocated in this fashion. So when we look across the board, that's why the difference is in the pension. It's not that it's going up, it's not, because it actually is not going up. It's just the way we allocate it to the active members. So when someone leaves, we take it off that portion of the city's books. And then the last one, big increase, is street lighting. So the cost for that is, electricity is going up, obviously. That's a big amount for all this, to have the street lights. That's really the only thing happening there. Page 65 is the building maintenance. So that's just the building maintenance for all the different funds. Really, that's kind of not much going on there. It's just about the same. Electric service went up again, or projecting to go up. Next one is motor vehicles. This is the maintenance of all the vehicles. This we were talking about the employee who fixes and prolongs life, we should say, of the vehicles. So that's page 67, 68. We then allocate what we do here is based on the actual, we then allocate the expenses back to the other departments. This is kind of like for the in and out of how much the maintenance costs. So if you see the 170, we take 172 and we allocate the 170 out to the other departments as they use the service. And then last is the parks, page 6970. This is just basically, it's about the same as last year, nothing really going on there. Just cutting grass, chemicals, it's just maintaining of the parks. Any questions for Jeff, on those different departments?
Any questions from council? Nope.
All right, we can go back up real quick. Let's do page 106, which is block grant. Not much going on here. Yeah. So, block grant, is right now, all we have budgeted in block grant, we get an allocation of $20,000. Most of it is for the senior services. And then one's for the annual membership for the Guidance Center, and the other one is a membership for Senior Alliance. So it's really just kind of an in and out. We are working, and we've been having conversations with Mark Kibbe. He kind of controls and administers the block grant. So we're looking at history, we're kind of doing a history of that and auditing and to make sure that everything has been vouchered and has been released. So we're working on that. There is some money sitting in there from liens or of the past history that I just don't have history of. So he's going to go through it and we're going to make adjustments and put that money back to the funds that I think it was originally expended to, and it just never got put back. So money should not be sitting there, and it is, and I just want to bring that to your attention because it's part of the audit, and we're looking into that. He's going to re-audit and figure out, it probably belongs to general fund in most parts, so that's always nice when you come up with something like that. So we will let you know and how that goes, and like I said, I gave him the information and he's looking into it and taking it back, the history of it.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, and there he's working on a huge grant. We're expected to get almost $300,000 for the park. Which park? I'm not sure what the park.
I believe it's, where's the pickleball courts, in Memorial Park?
Vreeland.
Freeland Park.
That's it, Freeland.
So in Vreeland Park,
Yeah.
it looks like we're going to get some bathrooms, some monies for bathrooms.
Oh, cool.
Football.
Around the pickleball courts, so that we don't have outhouses there, so.
Yep.
And that'll be total grants. If we get enough, we may be able to do the roof on the pavilion there, that needs to be done, so.
And he did see that. He said that there's money, there'll be money
And
available.
it looks like he can't guarantee it, but he said it looks pretty darn good right now, so we're staying on him for that.
Oh, very
Get
good.
a big grant every 5 years, and that's our.
Oh, is this the one from Wayne County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is
Yeah,
federal money.
we're due our turn for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's federal money that flows through Wayne County. So, yep, he administers that, and so that's all coming together. So that's exciting.
Very good.
And then, let's see, so that's block grant. Let's go back to, I know I'm putting the building part off, but let's go back to page number 111. This is just the capital improvement fund. I'm trying not to forget anything. Because I told you about those big expenditures. So the capital improvement fund is built for all fixed assets for the general government, not the enterprise funds. So this is how we control and put all the capital improvements for the governmental funds. So remember I told you about those two expenses, the big one, which was the HVAC upgrade on page 113, 318, and then the ambulance on 394. And you probably thought, well, how in the heck are we going to pay for those? So we came up and we committed those through COVID funds. So we are not taking those out of general fund. Those are the COVID relief funds that will be the end of them. So after those two are spent, we will have no more COVID funds remaining. And we needed to commit those by the end of '24. So we did that, we're in compliance with that, and we are using that for those two big expenditures.
So, just in summary, Your Honor and Counsel, we got 1.2 million, we used 600,000 last year to offset some police and fire, police, and then this year we used the balance to take care of the HVAC here and the new ambulance coming. And as Ann said, we had to commit those by December 2024, so.
Yep. All right, I think we're getting to the end. The next is the building department. So we want to look at page, I'm going to have you do a couple fingers here. Page 35, put a finger in there. Put a finger in 72 and 74.
So, Your Honor and Counsel, before we get started, I have the building department, Mr. Dave Skirdos with us. Also from Carlisle Workman, Mr. Mike Razik's here with us, a director, and Jen DeFore from the building department. It was brought to my attention earlier this year that our building permit fees and inspection fees were way low. I mean, even lower than state minimum kind of thing. And what we realized is it wasn't covering the cost of our inspections and our inspectors. And so therefore, in theory, the general fund or all the residents were paying for the inspections of the individual improvements happening at businesses in the city and/or residents. And so I said, build me a rate fee structure that's in line with every community around us, not higher than the communities, but at least over the state minimum and more realistic. Well, what goes with that is, and we talked about this, and I mentioned it in a study session, that even our contract rates with our vendor wasn't increased since, I don't want to misspeak, but something like 2013. And so I had to find a way to A, fund those expenses, and B, make sure that the general fund's not paying for these inspection fees. So with that, in our new fee schedule, I'm putting a fee schedule together. As you know, some fees have to be improved sooner than later because Mike needs golf rates in the spring, Kevin needs gate rates in the late winter, early spring. Well, then I'm going to be bringing a total rate fee schedule to you for this next year, July's budget, which will include this. So I just wanted to give you the Cliff Note version of what we got here. I'm going to since they're here tonight, I'm going to let Dave, Mike, and if they need any help from Jen, because Jen also collaborated the information for me. But that's kind of the idea here, that there's no fees are going to change until July, and no increases to any contract services would change until July. However, they're included in this budget so that you could see them. So I think that's why Ann's got you on two different pages. The pages of the fees, the revenue, and the pages on the expense. So before I get going, I think I'd let Mike and Dave and Jen speak to this. Of course, they know it way better than I do because they take all the calls all the time. And so
Just a quick comment before you guys get started is, just so some of the residents will know, is obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the public safety millage and how we intended to go for 4 mills last year, sometime in October. And council at that time put a stop to the 4 mills and directed Jeff and his staff to go look through all the things in the budget, anything that has to do with the finance of the city. And this just proves that you guys dug real deep on not only where we move our money, where we keep our money and get higher interest rates, but a more equitable fee schedule for all of the services that we provide. So, and that's why we're able to get that down from 4 to 2, and then, you know, whatever it is next year. But, I mean, it's a lot of, it says a lot for you, Jeff, and your staff, that you found a significant amount of money, not that we didn't have to cut anything, we just had to work smarter.
And Mayor, I appreciate that, and one thing I do want to say that, you know, one huge saving, Grace, and you'll see it later in the budget, and Ann will go through it when I think she gets to budget, finance, and treasury, is the interest income. She's got $600,000 budgeted for next year. That's 5%. In the old days, we were lucky to get 1% or 1.2% or 0.75%. So kudos to her. You know, I always told her, I said, you know, that's almost 2 mils, you know. So anyhow, let Dave explain our ideology here. I think it makes a lot of sense. These things weren't looked at, I don't think, since, 2013. So now it's time to revisit this and, you know, kind of put it in the right order.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'm going to let Mike Radzik from our office get into the details of the fee structures. They did a ton of work on it.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Per Mr. Dobek's direction, Jen and myself, with the help of some of our other staff, did what essentially was an audit, a fee study of the city's fees coming out of the building department, which would have included building permits for building, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which are commonly referred to as the trades, as well as the home sale inspection permits, and the rental inspection program for the city that the building department also administers. We did a pretty deep dive. We looked at, per Jeff's direction, we looked at all of the immediate neighboring communities around Riverview. And then we also looked at some other communities around southeast Michigan that were of a similar population or geographic base or property value base, just to kind of double check the work. And what we found was what Jeff strongly suspected, was that our fees here in Riverview were inadequate to cover costs, but more importantly, were not in alignment with your neighbors and other similarly situated communities. So with the direction that you never want to be the highest and you don't want to be the lowest, it's best to be somewhere in the median or at the average. We put together, we looked at the fees that were being charged, and not only the actual dollar amount, but the process involved. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by, a couple of examples what I mean by that. And we made recommendations to not only adjust fees, but also to adjust some of the processes that the city was using in order to make it equitable all the way around. As Jeff indicated, you certainly don't want property owners that have no benefit from a building inspection to have to pay for that building inspection for their neighbors or for some commercial businesses' activities. So having that as our marching orders, if you will, we set about to do that, and we made a few things really stood out to us. The city had been charging what was being called an administrative fee for every permit application. It was $20, and there was also a $50. Am I doing something wrong? Yeah, it's off, okay. There was a $50 minimum permit fee. Most communities charge a non-refundable application or base permit fee. This covers all of the administrative effort involved in processing the application. Jen, if you haven't spoken to her or spent any time visiting in the building department office, you'll know that she spends a lot of time with customers, especially residential property owners who are not contractors, who don't necessarily know how to fill out a building permit application if they're going to put on a deck or some other pretty basic thing. So she spends a lot of time, as do the other staff in that department, helping people at the counter to make sure that they're applying in order to get the outcome that they're desiring. We also do all of the invoicing and the billing, the collections for those fees, the scheduling for the inspectors to go out for however many inspections it might need. And we also found out that in addition to all that, the base permit fee, if you will, was included an inspection, or in some cases, more than one inspection, which in no way, shape, or form was covering or coming close to covering your costs. It was probably a holdover from decades ago when things were more likely to have been done that way in a lot of communities that have since updated, and I think if adopted, this would bring Riverview into the 21st century as well. In its, I guess, most basic form, building permits, rental inspections, home sale inspections should really be a pass-through to the person or the entity that's benefiting from it. So the goal would be to attempt to charge an adequate fee to cover all of your costs, certainly not to make a profit, because the city's not in the business to make a profit, but to absolutely cover costs. And costs are not just wages, fringe benefits for your employees or your contractors, consultants in this case, but, you know, the building department and the planning office uses the BS&A software program that I'm sure you're familiar with. That costs money, and there's an annual maintenance fee for that software upkeep. A lot of communities are now switching to BSA Cloud, their subscription-based cloud service, which cuts down on your equipment costs, but it's very expensive to get there. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to do the transition to the cloud. The return on investment comes over time, so.
Like you said, it's a subscription-based thing. Who pays the subscription? Is it the resident or the city?
The city does,
Okay.
but the idea would be for every permit sold, if you will, to a customer, for every rental inspection, for every home sale inspection, and you process that, you want to include those capital expenses, not necessarily rent, but the office space for the building department, the cost of your phone services, the cell phones being used in the field, your tablet computers, the BS&A software, all that goes into determining what the proper fee for those services would be in order to help cover your costs. So we did all that, and we came up with this recommendation. The base application fee is probably the biggest glaring thing that stood out among all others. It wasn't nearly enough to cover that administrative and those back-end capital expenses. And the fact that the city was including one and sometimes two inspections with that fee, you weren't paying for, somebody else was paying for those inspections, not the applicant. So we've tried to correct that. And to right that ship, if you will, to only charge what was necessary to be charged for those inspections. So some of the inspection fees have been recommended to be updated. We looked at other communities. The multifamily rental inspection program for the apartment communities was seriously low. We looked at some other examples, and in particular, your neighbor in Southgate, because they just recently embarked on multifamily inspections. And as their consultant, we had done a very, very thorough, comprehensive study of the fees that they required in order to cover their costs. And so your expenses were very, very close to theirs, and so we looked to save the city some effort. Why reinvent the wheel when it was done for the very same activity in a neighboring community that borders the city? So we recommended updating to mirror those rental inspection fees for the apartment communities. We tried to keep the fees for residential applicants as low as possible versus the commercial and industrial uses. Have I left anything significant out? I think that was pretty much it.
We're going to switch the inspection to...
Yes, and one of the examples of process changes would be charging per inspection. We tried to keep every permit, building permit, if you will, generally has an initial inspection, and some require an initial and a final inspection. But all too often, unfortunately, the initial will fail, and there's re-inspections in between that and the final outcome that when it gets approval. So we tried to keep the initial and the final inspections low at $50, but the ones in between, when they're having difficulty meeting code compliance, and there's a lot of extra effort on behalf of the building department to help get them where they need to be, those would be increased to 75. Another example of a process change would be the way the city has traditionally administered its multifamily and single-family rental program. I think the finance director could weigh in if she wishes, because I know she must have, I haven't spoken to her about it, but I know she must have noticed the revenue and expenditures for the multifamily program tend to look like a roller coaster. They may be very high one year and very low the next year, and it's not predictable, and therefore it's very difficult to budget both the expenses and the revenue. And that was because we were leaving it to the property owners in terms of when they passed and when they were coming back the next time, and the city should drive that, control that workflow.
Wouldn't that be based on, when we started, weren't they on like a 3-year cycle? Would they have a lot to do with
Correct.
the up and down?
Yes, however, to properly manage it, the way pretty much every community does, you don't want to do them all the same year, right? So you want to spread out that workflow over the length of the cycle so that you don't need extra inspector effort if you're doing them all at once. And it makes it easier to control and monitor the workflow and to have monetary, expense control over that work and who's doing it, and over the revenue side too. If you spread it out equitably over that 3-year period so that you're controlling the workload, with the exception of those anomalies like, say, an apartment community that just can't come into compliance right away, and it may drag out before they finally get there. There's a lot of re-inspections, and maybe the code official is in there trying to help teach them and their maintenance people how to comply in the most cost-effective way.
I'm sure we're going through that.
It's not uncommon. Riverview is not alone. The city should be controlling that, and so we've recommended that you allow our building department to actually do that, so that year in and year out over that 3-year cycle, the expense and the revenue is approximately equal, and then more easily predicted for budgeting purposes.
Very good.
So those are a couple of the examples of the process changes that we've recommended. As the city manager alluded to, and I'll just wrap it up after this, you'll notice, I'm sure you have already noticed, the expense for contractual services, there's a big increase. As the city manager had noted, we're currently operating under a contract that was executed in 2012, and there's been no rate increase since. This is a very important partnership for our company, and hopefully it's felt in the opposite direction as well. And so we've continued operating under a automatic temporary extension for the last 12 years. But there comes a point where it has to be made right, and I can tell you our company has sharpened the pencil and made as many concessions as possible in order to make this work, and we've tried to correct the inequities in the fee schedule without overcharging, without being overbearing, without putting you at the top, in order to help support that. And I think if you look at the comparison of expenses to revenues over the last couple of years, as I think is in your packet or you've seen, it's the projected expense for 24-25 is very, very close to breaking even and stopping the bleeding, if you will, from years past. And then going forward, it should only continue to get better.
Well, thank you, and I know council and myself do appreciate that. And I'll just say, it goes back to, for years, we've been trying to do the best for our residents as we can. And we've tried our best to keep the expenditures low and at the expense of, obviously at some of our own contractors. So we need to start fixing that. And I certainly want to appreciate what you guys have done and getting us back on track where we need to be with all these fees. Jeff?
Your Honor and Counsel, I really want to study it too for 120 days. And so what I may propose is even an MOU to kind of ease into it and see exactly what revenue we bring in for 120 days compared to the expense. And I think it'd be a good, judge of where we're at and how it's working. So instead of a multi-year deal or whatever, let's try an MOU for a little bit and then pass that. If it's working as planned, then we can, look at it for a longer term. But I'm looking, at it as a trial, as an MOU, so.
I'll just have a quick question on the rates and inspections. And this would, I guess, just be referring to business and commercial. How much does a potential business moving in the Riverview look at inspection fees and the things they have to do, the cost of them to do business here? If it's been on the lower end, do you think that would have an impact of businesses, addressing Riverview or considering Riverview?
That's a difficult question.
I think what you're going to find is that people that are looking for the lowest rates possible to come in are the ones that have a cash flow problem to start with. And because I see awful lot of businesses come in, they don't even last a year and they go, because record keeping when people leave. But over the years, I've just seen more and more folks come in, and the ones that are always asking, how come I got paid this or paid this much? The clerk's fees, the building business license and things. If I find them going out of business quite rapidly.
And obviously, we've seen our fair share of that, so I just wonder how much of a role that played. So if they're looking to get off cheap right away, then it might be an indication of a problem.
I think you're overall, generally, you're going to find that.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
I'm sorry, Jen was just reminding me. Jen makes an effort when a new business that signs a lease for a commercial space comes in to do, whether it's remodeling or repurposing because it's a change of use. She makes sure that she has this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, to talk to their landlord and determine up front exactly what expenses are they responsible for versus what expenses would the property owner be responsible for. And then I think she helps try to shepherd them through the process in the most effective way possible.
And that just echoes the feedback that I've been getting over the years, where because of where we are and the types of buildings we have available, most of them are their tenants and, to somebody else. And the ones I've talked to, it boggles my mind of that the proprietor is bearing most of the costs when I thought the landlord should.
That's why we try.
Yeah. And I can just tell you, I worked for almost 20 years for another municipality in southeast Michigan, and they had similar issues at one time. And as much as I hate to say it, they may have been giving away new Class C liquor licenses, bottom basement bargain prices to get that in, but not vetting the applicants well enough. And as a result, they lost almost half of their Class C licenses that were allotted by the state because the business failed, and then they were left owning a very expensive asset, being a liquor license, which can be transferred anywhere within the county. And they did. They sold them and walked away. So you really want to set yourself up to avoid putting yourself in that situation.
And I just will add, and I don't know if we can finish up with this, is we do get a lot of compliments on Jen in the department. The business owners I've talked to anyway, you guys are really easy to work with, and nothing but compliments for you guys. Thank you. Jeff? Or Ann?
I guess we're back to Ann.
I'm just going to finish up, just going with what we're talking about, revenue expenses, on the general fund.
Is your microphone on, by the way? Okay.
No, 'cause I thought okay, now we're back. All right, just go over the pages that we've been talking about. Page 35 is the actual revenues. So it went from 345 to 652, and you can see, we'll show you, that's why I had you connect to those other pages. The two departments that revenue has to cover is on page 72, which is the Community Development Department, and those are budgeted, that was budgeted at 146, and the other one is page 74, which is 399,724. If you look from this year to the previous year, since 2000, as they were talking about, the building department should be a break-even entity and should not eat off the general fund and should be on their own. It has, since 2000, it has accumulated because the audit has changed and the requirements changed to how you're reporting for the building department. It has a very large deficit over 2000 in the amount of almost $2 million. And that's because just, it wasn't looked at, the rates weren't adjusted, but we're now going in the right direction. So last budget year, it was a negative 158,000. This year, it's budgeted to gain 106,000. So in reality, it should have been all along a self-sustaining entity, and then you're supposed to actually have a surplus, because in the event when building goes down, it should still be able to take care of the department. And I'm sure that was a big reason why the department went to a contractual service and not employees anymore, so.
I believe it was 2000, well, I don't know the exact date, but they were in good shape through 2013. That's when I know it was in good shape till.
Is that when you left, Dean? Okay, I was just checking.
And I think that's it for a day.
Great. Any questions for, oh, wait a minute. Dave?
Yeah,
Okay.
community development.
All right.
That's okay? Okay. Yeah, just, we did a deep dive in our contractual budget too, and we found a way to save us a little bit of money. We found out that in the past, we were getting paid $142,800 a year. That included base service, having somebody on site 3 days a week. It included special projects, anything that came in that was outside hours, not only for our company, but for property appraisal. It was block grant from Mark Kibbe, and then all the meetings were included. So I was under contract to attend 72 meetings a year here. I ran some numbers. We decided to break everything out. So we decided to save money this year if they're going to stick with the base services. The meetings we broke out, I estimated, taking an hourly rate, 2.5 hours per meeting, and all those meetings, I estimated the city was paying $27,000 a year for me to sit here. Even though I like everybody, I found a ways that I can lessen the time. I did the numbers. Last year, I only attended out of 72 was 54. So what we'd like to do is go case-by-case basis for meetings. That way, if the planning commission doesn't meet, they're supposed to meet twice a month, they meet one time a month, I bill one time a month. I'm not under an overall contract billing twice a month. The ZBA, the same thing, they met 8 out of 12 times last year, that's 4 months. On the new budget, I wouldn't bill for. Council, I think I attended 34 out of 36 meetings, but it'd be up to like the council itself, but there are a number of meetings, I have nothing on the agenda. And if council's so pleased, we could work in something on a case-by-case basis there.
So you'd only have to be here if there's something on the agenda.
Probably
that can
study
change it.
sessions, and then there was something on the agenda. Most of the time in the past, I was here for 3 days because at that point, we had code enforcement underneath our departments. There was pretty much every meeting, there was a code enforcement matter that we had to answer. Now code enforcement got transferred to the police department, so we don't have that issue. Any issue comes up with code, I'm in very close contact with John Allen, with Chief Allen, and we get everything ironed out ahead of time. In terms of the meetings, even though I had $27,000 budgeted, last year, I probably would have only billed $21,000 for the meetings. And it could go down from there. If council decided they didn't need me at every meeting, that would even drop from that point. We did pull out Mark Kibbe. He asked for a budget of $8,500 for block grant services, and since it's totally shipped out to Mark, we gave him his own line item at that point. Special projects, now we would work with Jeff's office. If we need some money or something came in, we had a special project. Like last 2 years, we completed a new master plan for the planning commission. We would sit down with the manager and Ann and Jeff first and go over what we think the cost would be and see where we can get the money from. So it'd be on a case-by-case basis, and they would have to give us their sign-off.
Great.
So in the end, it looks like we can save about $4,000, $4,500 a year.
That's uncommon
Not more.
coming from a contractor.
So,
I
I
think-
don't with you too long, to watch out everything.
Your Honor,
Thank you.
and
Jeff.
counsel, if we need someone here from Carlisle Workman, we'll have someone here. So all you have to do is contact me. If there's an issue that you feel is from the building department or community develop, whatever, just call me and I'll have them here. I just, Kevin did this with the landfill engineer, and the landfill engineer is only here when there's an item of importance or issue, and that was a way that Kevin could shave off some of his consulting fee at the landfill. So it seemed to work pretty good. It's not that we don't like these people, but we just need to use them when we need them, instead of just bulk having them around, so.
Great idea.
One final thing.
Yes,
I want
sir.
to point out, we are in contact 5 days a week. Jeff, Randy, or anybody gives me a call or an email, we get back to them, there's no charge, we just get back to them and try to plug whatever they need until we can get into the office and do some more research.
And we appreciate that. Thanks, Dave. Is that it, Ann? All right, now's the time for public comment. I'm not going to give the speech because he's shaking his head no. Okay? Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. Thanks.